One decision destroyed my life. It happened 5 years ago. We were young, madly in love, and planning our wedding. He proposed like something out of a movie, beautifully, sincerely, with his voice trembling. Then the preparations began in earnest. The wedding was supposed to be lavish, magical, especially since my parents had helped so much, giving up their savings for our happiness. The dress was already chosen, the venue booked, guests notified. But then he got a job offer in another city, a major promotion. He had to leave quickly, immediately, because the competition for this position was fierce. I really didn't want to go. I had everything here, friends, family, a job I loved. But he begged, painted beautiful pictures of our future. Babe, it's only for a year. Imagine, we'll come back, buy a house, no mortgage. We'll start our lives like royalty. So we postponed the wedding. The terms really did look good. We could buy our own place within a year on that salary. That evening when we boarded the train, I cried. He wiped away my tears, kissed my palms, and whispered promises. I believed him. I breathed his ambitions. The new city greeted us with gray skies and bone-chilling wind. The promised dream apartment turned out to be a rented studio with someone else's smell, old furniture, and thin walls. We need to save so we can buy our own place faster, he said. And I didn't complain. I became his support system. While he clawed his way up, working in the office until midnight, I created comfort from nothing. I put my career plans on hold, took a mediocre job so I'd have time to cook his dinners and iron perfect shirts for his meetings. The first warning sign came after 6 months. My mom called to ask about the new wedding date. The venue was still holding our booking, though they were asking for confirmation. When I asked him about it over dinner, he froze. His fork clattered onto the plate. Is this really what you're thinking about right now? His voice was cold, unfamiliar. I'm trying to establish myself in this position. I'm working my ass off, and you're thinking about napkins and doves? I'm thinking about us, I said quietly. If you're thinking about us, then give me some peace. The wedding will happen, but not now. I canceled the booking. My parents said nothing, but I could hear the deep disappointment in Dad's voice. A year passed. The promised house never materialized. The money we were supposed to be saving evaporated before our eyes. He said, I need to maintain the right image. New expensive suits, a designer watch, dinners with the right people that I wasn't invited to because, as he said, I didn't understand business. He changed. His gaze became calculating, cynical. He'd come home at dawn, smelling of expensive alcohol and unfamiliar perfume that he called the office smell. I became a shadow. I waited. I made excuses for him to my parents, lied to my friends that we were just saving for something grand. I became a convenient function in his life. On the 3rd anniversary of our wedding that never was, I prepared a romantic dinner. He came home at 2 a.m, sober but angry. Why aren't you asleep? He snapped, not even glancing at the candles. Today was supposed to be our wedding, 3 years ago. He sighed heavily, sat on the couch, and rubbed his temples as if I were a headache. You're stuck in the past. I'm growing. And you're just waiting. You've become boring. Your conversations are only about household stuff. Where's the girl I fell in love with? That girl sacrificed everything so you could grow. For the first time in a long time, I raised my voice, swallowing tears. He looked at me with pity. Not anger, but pity. That hurt the most. The end came suddenly, like a knife in the back. 5 years. 5 years of my life in waiting mode. That day I came home early. I'd been laid off from that same mediocre job. I was devastated. I wanted support. I wanted him to hug me and tell me everything would be okay, because he was earning enough now and we could finally live. The key didn't turn in the lock. The door was open. In the hallway stood suitcases, my suitcases. Old, worn, the ones I'd arrived with 5 years ago. He was sitting in the kitchen, not alone. Across from him sat a woman, polished, confident, in an impeccable business suit. She looked at me not as a rival, but as an inconvenience that needed to be quickly removed. This was Victoria, the daughter of his company's owner. I'd seen her photos on social media. You're here, he said, not standing up. What's going on? My voice trembled, my legs buckled. We need to talk. He gestured to a chair, but I stayed standing in the doorway. This is Victoria. We've been together for a year. The world tilted. A year? While I was ironing his shirts? While I was saving money to buy him a new leather briefcase? While I was waiting for him at night? You've been lying to me for a year? I didn't want to hurt you, he said in that same soft tone he'd once used to promise me a wedding. But this can't continue. I've outgrown this relationship. You're wonderful, but Victoria understands my ambitions. She's from my world. From your world? I laughed. A hysterical, terrible laugh. I built this world for you with my own hands. I left home. I gave up my dream wedding, my parents' help. I'll pay you back, Victoria suddenly interjected. Her voice was dry and businesslike. She pulled out a checkbook and a Parker pen. How much did your parents spend 5 years ago? We'll compensate with interest. That was the end. Not the betrayal, not the screaming. But this cold calculation. They wanted to buy off my 5 years of life, my youth, my murdered trust with a piece of paper with numbers on it. He said nothing as I silently took my suitcases. He didn't even stand up to walk me to the door. The last thing I heard was Victoria asking him, "Honey, do we still make our flight to Paris?" Paris. The city where we dreamed of going on our honeymoon. I went outside. The same unfamiliar city, the same cold rain. I sat on a wet bench and with trembling fingers dialed the number. "Mom," I said, and my voice broke into a scream I'd been holding back for 5 years. "Mom, I'm coming home. It's over." He thought that was the end of my life, but it was only the beginning. I returned to my parents' house, to my old room with posters on the walls that seemed like mockery of my 27 years. The first weeks I just lay there. Mom silently brought me tea and stroked my head like I was a little girl. Dad, who had always been proud of my resilience, now tried not to make noise passing by my door. I felt defective. Used material. For 5 years I'd been convenient, and then I was thrown away. I was afraid to look in the mirror because I saw a woman who had forgotten who she was. The money that Victoria had nobly thrown at me burned my hands. I wanted to burn it, tear it up, send it back. But Dad said, "This isn't charity. This is compensation for emotional damages. Use it as a foundation for yourself, not for him." And I dared. I'd always loved flowers, but my ex had considered floral design nonsense without prospects. I enrolled in courses, not for a career, but so my hands would be busy with something living, not ironing someone else's shirts. The scents of eucalyptus, peonies, and roses gradually displaced the smell of that cold city and his betrayal. I got a job as an assistant in a small, cozy design studio. I no longer cooked 3-course dinners. I learned to breathe. 6 months later, Alex appeared in my life. He wasn't a millionaire, didn't wear $1,000 suits, and didn't talk about ambitions every 5 minutes. He was an architect who ordered greenery from us for his projects. Our meeting wasn't like a lightning strike. I was processing an order. He was checking the estimate. "You have very sad eyes," he said then, not looking up from the papers, "but the bouquets you create are very joyful." "It's professional," I muttered. "The sadness or the joy?" He finally raised his eyes. Calm, warm, brown. He didn't try to win me over. He just started being there. First coffee after work, then help with heavy boxes. I shied away from him. I waited for the trick. Waited for him to ask me to wait, or for when I'd become not good enough for him. "Why are you so tense?" he asked once when we were walking in the park. "Because I'm used to getting a bill for everything good," I answered honestly. He stopped, took my hands in his. They were warm, unlike my ex's perpetually cold hands, and said, "I don't send bills. I just want to see you smile." Exactly 1 year had passed since that day I stood with my suitcases on the street. I met this day not in tears. Alex and I were having dinner at a small restaurant. I was laughing. I was wearing a dress I'd chosen myself, not one that fit the image. I worked at a job I loved, where I was valued. At one point, Alex pulled out a small box. My breath caught from fear. Old trauma flared up. "Don't be scared," he said gently, noticing my alarm. "It's not a ring. Not yet. I know your story. I don't want to rush you." He opened the box. Inside was a key. "It's to my apartment. I'm not asking you to move in right now, and I'm definitely not asking you to cook me borscht. I just want you to know. You always have a place where you're welcome." where you're expected not as a servant, but as the woman I love. I clutched that key in my palm. It was heavy and real. Across from me sat a man who in 6 months had given me more warmth than that person had in 5 years. I raised my eyes, looked at Alex, and felt peace spreading inside me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. I placed my palm over his hand and said quietly, "Thank you for being real." 3 months later, I got very sick. The flu, temperature of 104. My ex in such cases would usually go sleep in the living room saying, "Don't infect me, I have an important meeting," and I'd crawl to the kitchen for water myself. Alex arrived 20 minutes after my call. He brought medicine, broth that he'd made himself, even if slightly oversalted, and just sit nearby, changing my cold compresses. I looked at him through my fever and thought, is this what love is? Not Paris, not grand words, but just broth? That morning I cried for the first time, not from pain, but from relief. I realized I'd spent 5 years living in a freezer thinking it was home.